I want to begin by thanking our witness, Ms. Rena Bitter, for being here today, as well as thank the thousands of consular affairs employees who work at regional passport agencies across the country and in embassies across the globe. With few exceptions, these men and women are committed to getting the job done. And when one of my constituents applies for a passport or reaches out when they run into trouble abroad, in my experience, it sets in motion a giant bureaucratic machine in many cases, and it's clear that that machine in many cases doesn't fire on all cylinders. And for the purpose of today's hearing for myself, I want to understand where those failures are and why that takes place. It's important because for many Americans, the Bureau of Consular Affairs is the only division of the State Department that they will ever interact with in their lives. Whether it's renewing a passport or dealing with an emergency abroad, we owe to those that we represent to make sure that this Bureau is getting things right no matter how big or how small the issue. And if an American's only experience with the State Department is a months-long delay on their passport application, then that's going to be the only thing that they remember about the Department of State. I come from a special operations background, and we had a saying that what makes special operations special is being able to do the most basic things at the highest possible level. And I'm not trying to diminish the importance of passports. They are arguably, however, the most common function of the Department of State. And last year, in reference to that, almost 18 million passport applications were received. That's a high number. It's very common, and yet it's clear that consular affairs isn't getting every one of them done in a timely fashion and at the highest possible level. On average, passport wait times are somewhere around 3 to 4 months, and that is a number that is increasing from what I understand. Visa wait times are even worse in many cases. Certain posts, it's not taking weeks or even months, it is taking years. I've dealt with this personally myself in trying to get people abroad those meetings. People are able to call their representative and usually get a passport renewed in a few days, but companies are also able to charge hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars and get it handled in a guaranteed 24 hours. An online system was developed for renewals by which most accounts got nearly 500,000 people to want to participate in, but that beta version crashed, leaving perhaps 500,000 people in limbo with that process. Here's what my constituents in some cases have had to say about their experiences in this process. So I just said goodbye to my family. I've been in tears all morning, very sad to see them all excited about the trip that I am supposed to be going on with them. The State Department has effectively made our families prisoners of the United States. These were a couple of quotes that people gave us after they were unable to get their passports when they needed them. I'm sure that my constituents would agree when I say that I would rather consular affairs efforts be spent on getting passports processed in a timely manner versus implementing gender-neutral passports. This change, as something else, effectively downgrades the gold standard of identification by allowing a person to not be identified as a man or a woman. Moreover, it's likely that this causes confusion for those ex-individuals who travel to foreign nations that don't recognize their pronouns, let alone the X next to their name on a U.S. government document. That's another problem. State needs to make sure that it's doing the basic things at the highest possible level, or the big things will fail miserably. And I understand that you came in the middle of this situation, but the crisis of evacuating or Americans from a collapsing Afghanistan went incredibly wrong. And I would love to ask your predecessor about much of what went on in that process. But while August of 2021 was far from a basic situation, it's clear that consular affairs operations were not performed at that time at the highest possible level. We have many questions about the withdrawal. What warnings were sent to American citizens and legal permanent residents in the weeks and days leading up to the pullout of Afghanistan, the pullout of our troops? What was consular affairs' roles in the contingency planning efforts? Why didn't we have an accurate count of how many Americans were in Afghanistan? Why, to this day, are we failing so many of the special immigrant visa holders who served alongside us who were completely abandoned and left for dead? These aren't new questions. I asked the special envoy to Afghanistan in May of 21 about special immigrant visas, and he could not even tell me at that time how many Afghans were eligible for the program. So why then did State Department not devote major resources over the next months to answering that question and formulating a response plan before August of 21? Additionally, it is my understanding that consular affairs is involved anytime an American is arrested abroad. And when it's suspected that these arrests are based on shaky circumstances, it's the job of consular affairs to investigate. Why then, following the disastrous and deadly withdrawal from Afghanistan, was there an attempt to not classify some Americans as wrongful detainees or hostages? It flies in the face of something that I know my colleague and I here very much believe in, which is no man left behind. And it disregards the United States government's most absolute fundamental job, the safety of United States citizens. State needs to make sure that it's doing the basic functions at the highest possible level, whether it's something like a passport or the national embarrassment that cost the lives of 13 service members. Americans are frustrated. We owe them answers. We do not owe them excuses. And again, I want to say that I'd give credit where credit is due. I know that consular affairs staff were back working in person far sooner than most federal government employees were in any other agency. But 3.5 years past the onset of the pandemic, I know very few people that accept COVID-19 as an excuse to this point, and I certainly do not as well. I'm confident that we all share a common goal, strengthening Americans' position on the global stage and making sure the basics are things that get done right in order to achieve that goal. I know it's important for all of us to work together in that. I am now going to yield to Ranking Member Crow for his opening remarks.